All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to dive in to Know the Signs, a suicide prevention gatekeeper training. Today is June 22nd, and we have more than 30 minutes worth of content that we're trying to pack in here. So I appreciate that this is a very brief overview of suicide prevention, and I'm always happy to provide additional trainings that go a lot more in depth. Today's presentation is modified from a deck that was created by Nevada County's suicide prevention programming. So thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to go ahead and hide myself, and we're going to dive right in. We're going to today talk about suicide prevention. We're going to talk about the Know the Signs campaign. We're going to talk more about signs and symptoms that someone might be experiencing suicidality. We'll briefly look at data and research, some risk factors, how to find the words if we are needing to have a conversation with someone. How do we start that conversation? And then how do we reach out? Who do we reach out to? I will have some time for questions, and I have a call to action for you. So we think of suicide prevention as a stream. We've got prevention that is way up. We've got all these little nooks and crannies and areas, to catch information and to slow things down. We've got the falls where we have the intervention to take place. And then postvention, if we do lose someone to suicide, there's a lot that can be done following their loss to prevent others from taking the same course. So thinking about prevention, that is really in the public health sphere. Intervention comes with behavioral health and crisis intervention teams, and then postvention is a behavioral health approach. Knowing the signs. So just very quickly, why are we doing this? Well, California has a campaign called Know the Signs. It's run by Each Mind Matters. And the idea here is that we're going to take a bystander approach to suicide prevention. We used to have a lot of significant drunk driving numbers, and drunk driving is still an issue, but the problem has come down quite a bit. We know that once we empowered people to recognize the signs that someone might be inebriated, we empowered them to take away the keys and prevent someone from drunk driving. Thus, our drunk driving rates have come down in the United States. The same is true for suicide prevention. If we're telling someone, you're feeling suicidal, you need to get help, you need to reach out, it puts a lot more of the burden on them, and it doesn't empower other people to take action. So Know the Signs is a campaign that teaches us all to know what the signs are, empowers us to find the words and to ask the question directly, are you thinking of suicide? And then being empowered to reach out. I'm going to pause it right there. If you've attended any of my trainings in the past, you know that we have to have these numbers programmed into our phone. So let's take this moment to take out your cell phone, or maybe just take a screen grab of this and you can program it later. We encourage you to have these numbers programmed into your phone because it might not be for you and it might not be for now, but someday these numbers could save a life. 1-800-273-TALK, 8522, and 741-741 are the numbers that you need to have in your phone. The Lifeline is going to connect you to the National Lifeline. It'll route you to your local call center. It's also going to say, if you are a veteran, please press 1, and it'll connect you to a veterans call center. 741-741, you'll notice that the name suicide is not in the title of this because it's not specific to suicide. It's any type of crisis. We know that with the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, you don't have to be suicidal to call. Maybe you're concerned about a friend, a coworker, or a loved one. You can always reach out to them to say, I've noticed this and I'm concerned. Can you please help me come up with a plan to approach this person? Or can you share local resources? It's always a listening ear. So 2 very important numbers to have in your cell phone. Know the Signs, again, is run by Each Mind Matters. It is funded through California, and it has an incredible website, suicidispreventable.org. When you go to that website, you will be able to see a whole bunch of different signs. The signs and symptoms that somebody might be contemplating suicide are different based on their age or other demographics. And so you'll be able to pull up different groups of people and see what the signs are specifically for them. There are so many signs. It's really hard to get them all on a piece of paper. What we know is that you'll get a gut feeling that something isn't right. When you get that gut feeling, we want you to know how to start the conversation and how to connect them to care. The reach out section of this website is incredible. It has resources broken up by county throughout the state of California. I've done a lot of prevention work throughout Idaho, Utah, and as well as part of Nevada, and I've never seen a state website with such robust resources. So it's definitely a great website to check out. Suicidispreventable.org. You can also download additional Know the Signs materials, and I have printed materials available if at any point you would like to host a training at your organization. So there are some signs that we want to be aware of. We want to know what these critically important signs are. If somebody is talking about death or suicide, if they've got changes in mood or behavior, expressions of hopelessness, sharing their desperation, or if they're putting their affairs in order. These are some powerful signs at any age, in any demographic, that we need to intervene. Some of those critical signs: if they're talking about death or suicide, if they're seeking methods for self-harm, an example might be searching online for a plan. It might be obtaining a gun. It could be stockpiling medication. These would all be critical signs. Anytime that they are just talking about feeling hopeless or helpless or not having a reason to live, these should send off a red flag alert that something isn't right. They could be talking about death and suicide, and it could be subtle or vague. It could be, I just don't see the point in going on. But if they say that and you get that gut feeling or a red alert goes off, it's worth following up on. It could mean nothing, but it could mean that they are thinking about suicide. They might also be direct and literal. They might say, I am going to kill myself. If this doesn't happen, I will kill myself. I'm going to end it all. Those are the direct statements where we do have an alert that goes off and we need to follow up. It also could be something that's written, drawn, or posted to social media. There might be changes in mood, so they might be uncharacteristically sad or depressed. They could be unusually happy after a period of feeling sad or depressed. An example of this might be when somebody has been struggling for a long time. There's been a lot of conflict in the home, and all of a sudden something just flips and they're no longer struggling. They're happy, they're content. It could mean that something has been resolved, but it could also mean that they've made a decision to end their life, and it's brought them a lot of relief. They might be putting those plans in place and starting to procure the means necessary. And so it doesn't mean that we need to be constantly worried, but it does mean that if there's suddenly somebody who has turned the corner, we still need to make sure that we have suicide on our mind, and if we see anything, that we say something. Uncontrolled anger, expressing or acting in ways that reflect hostility, bitterness, resentment, or rage, or if somebody's talking about seeking revenge, we want to just make note of that. This could potentially mean suicide. Some other changes in behavior could be reckless behavior, like reckless spending of money, increased use of alcohol or drugs. If they stop talking to or doing things that they might have enjoyed at one point, and it means they've completely stopped and they're not replacing it with something else. A teenager might be an avid soccer player, and then all of a sudden they stop doing what they at one time enjoyed and they're not replacing it with something else. They might be sleeping more or can't sleep or seem restless, any type of changes to normal sleep patterns. Another change in behavior would be just appearing anxious, being really shaken or worried. Expressions of hopelessness or despair. They might not see how their situation or life could get better. They might not see a way out of their situation. They might drop hints that life just seems pointless. What is the point of going on? Maybe being a burden to others, family, friends, or society. A statement might be, they'll be better off without me. And having no sense of purpose. Sometimes we see this after a life transition, graduating from one grade level into another, like graduating from high school into adulthood without a next step, perhaps transitioning out of the military or professional athletes transitioning out without the next step in place. Transitioning out of a career is another piece where we might look forward to retirement, but if we don't have concrete plans that tie us to a purpose and connect us to the community, that can really lead to despair. Another cause for concern might be somebody who's putting their affairs in order. They're rushing to complete or revise a will. Maybe they're checking in on life insurance policies that aren't necessarily mature. Maybe they're giving away prized possessions or sharing passwords, social media, or gaming personas. This can be big with youth. Young people who have died by suicide, oftentimes the parents say, there were no signs. We didn't see anything. The teachers might not have seen anything, but typically their peers had some idea. Usually there were communications that went back and forth through either online, social media, or maybe just through text messaging. And those secrets are something that the friends and the peer groups were trying to solve within themselves, and they kept that secret. They didn't tell a trusted adult. And that is why it's so important for us to train our young people and to train everyone to be the eyes and the ears of their school and of their social setting, so that when something is recognized, that everyone feels empowered to act. Teenagers, some of the specific signs and symptoms for teens: they complain of physical pain, and it's often related to their emotions. They might be complaining about their head or their stomach, and really the underlying concern is emotional. Neglect of personal appearance. So somebody who typically took a lot of pride in their appearance, all of a sudden is no longer concerned about that. They might show a significant personality change, have a loss of interest in those activities that they once enjoyed. That example of the soccer player who quit soccer but doesn't replace it with, joining a theater production or spending a lot of time in their first romantic relationship. So, and then again, we talked about teens and the connection to social media. This is a quick video from the Mayo Clinic on teen suicide prevention, hearing it from their point of view, what they wish adults knew.
I have my ups and downs, just like anybody else.
Maybe more than anybody else.
I can be hard to figure out.
And I like my privacy. I don't want you looking over my shoulder all the time.
But you know your kid better than anybody else. And if you think he's acting different than usual,
Acting really down, crying all the time for no good reason.
or getting really mad, not able to sleep, or sleeping too much,
Shutting her friends out or giving her stuff away.
acting reckless, drinking, using drugs, staying out late,
Suddenly not doing stuff he used to love.
or doing stuff that's just not like him.
It might be nothing to worry about. It might just be high school.
Or it might be something more. He might be depressed, not just feeling down, really depressed.
It might be that your kid is thinking about killing himself. It happens more than you think, more than it should.
And people say I had no idea.
I thought it was just a phase he was going through.
I never thought she'd do it.
I wish he'd come to me.
I wish he'd said
I
something
wish I'd said something.
when it's too late. So if you think your kid's acting different, if she seems like a different person, say something.
Say, what's wrong? How can I help?
And ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself? It doesn't hurt to ask. In fact, it helps.
When people are thinking about killing themselves, they want somebody to ask. They want somebody to care.
Maybe you're afraid you'll make it worse if you ask. Like, you'll put the idea in their head.
Believe me, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't hurt to ask. In fact, the best way to keep a teenager from killing herself is to ask. Are you thinking about killing yourself?
And what if they say yes?
Or maybe.
Or sometimes,
Well, here's what you don't say.
that's crazy.
Don't be such a drama
You're
queen.
making too much of this.
That boy's not worth killing herself over. That's not going to solve anything.
You're just trying to get attention.
You're not going to kill yourself. What you do say is,
I'm sorry you're feeling so bad. How can I help? We'll get through this together.
Let's keep you safe.
a lot of people think about killing themselves, adults and kids. Most of them never tried, but some of them do. So if your kid says,
I'd be better off dead. I can't live with
I'm
this.
gonna kill myself, take her seriously. Find someone she can talk to about it. Someone who knows how to help.
Sometimes kids want to kill themselves because something happened. A breakup, a failure. But sometimes it goes deeper, and it's not going to go away by itself. Get some help. Talk to your doctor.
Or a counselor at school.
Or your minister.
But don't just let it drop.
And make sure that your kid always has someone to turn to. Someone he trusts. Make a list together, right then. 3, 4, 5 names.
Put a suicide hotline number on there too.
Have him keep that list in his wallet so he always knows where to turn.
Be sure your home is safe.
If you have pills she could use to hurt herself, lock them up.
If you have a gun, don't just lock it up. Get it out of the house. The bullets, too.
And one more thing. If you think your kid might be about to hurt himself, don't leave him alone.
Take him to the emergency room.
Call 911 if you have to.
We all have our ups and downs, but sometimes it's more than that.
If you think something's wrong, the only way to find out is to ask.
Ask straight out. Are you thinking about killing yourself?
Don't wait until you're sure. Trust your gut, because it never hurts to ask.
And it can make a big difference.
All the difference.
in your kid's life.
All right. So, from teens themselves, taking a look at some national data. This comes from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. You can see this data comes from 2018. So unlike COVID, where we have daily hospital rates and daily lives lost, we don't have that type of data available to us for suicide prevention work. We work with data that's about 2 years out. But based on that 2018 data, suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, which means that on average, we're losing about 132 Americans per day by suicide. That translates to about 1.4 million Americans attempting suicide. If we think about that, that's a first and a last name. That's a car, that's a pet, that's a job, that's a family. That is like, when I'm speaking with legislators, one of the examples that really makes an impact with them is that's an airplane going down every single day where we're not addressing the cause of that flight going down. It's a complicated cause. It's not a malfunctioning, wheel. It's a very complex issue, but we are losing one airplane every single day. If we look over to the right, firearms account for over half of all suicide deaths in the United States. In rural communities, especially throughout the Rocky Mountain West, it is higher. It's closer to 65%, and in some communities, 90%. There is a cost associated with it. We've got about $69 billion in combined work loss and medical costs in 2015. We can estimate that 1.5%, the suicide rate is about 1.5 times higher for veterans than non-veterans, and about 10.3% of Americans have thought about suicide. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention does have some really great data. We're going to look here. This is the suicide rate per 100,000 people. And so if we're looking at California, Nevada, California has a lower rate than Nevada does. And if we think about Truckee, Tahoe and where we're located, really think about what does our demographic look like? Is it more California, more Nevada, or someplace in between? Some of the causes for the rates being higher in these rural states are kind of a bootstrap mentality, a rugged individualism where we take care of ourselves, and if we fail, it's our own personal moral failing. Access to health care is huge. The stigma that's connected to mental health. Another potential is living at altitude. The University of Utah is doing some studies on the ability to process serotonin when you live at a high altitude. There's a lot of theories, and again, nothing is a one size fits all answer. The rural Rocky Mountain West also has access to firearms and a culture of firearms that other urban areas don't necessarily. Looking at California, suicide is the 11th leading cause of death for Californians. It ranks 44th in the United States and costs, again, over $1 million per suicide. And so checking this against Nevada, it is the 8th leading cause of death in Nevada and ranks 9th out of the United States. Nevada, it's typically within the top 10 states year after year. Nevada and Utah have really been looking at the youth suicide rate, age 10 to 18, and Utah is the first state that came out to say it's now the first leading cause of death for their youth. And I know that Nevada has had more anecdotal information saying that while it is the second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 34, it's increasing in that youth piece. We don't have enough time to watch this video by Dr. Joyner, but Dr. Joyner has the interpersonal theory of suicidality. This is a theory that I am alone and I am a burden. And when those two pieces come together, that's what creates that desire for suicide. And it's not until a person builds the capacity for suicide that they're not afraid to die, that we have a near lethal attempt or a completed suicide. So I'm going to send this link. I'm not a fan of Dr. Phil necessarily, and it is an outdated video. You'll see that the language that they use has changed. They use the term committed suicide, and we no longer use that term. Committed means we committed a crime, we committed a sin, and we know that suicide is a mental health condition. And so for someone to commit something, there's stigma. And so now we use language like died by suicide or ended their life. So Dr. Joyner doesn't have a lot of interviews that are small and easy to digest. This is a really powerful one. And he also talks about suicide during pandemic times. So I'll send the link to this, and it's a 10-minute video that you guys can watch at your leisure. Some of the risk factors: family history, personal history, have substance use, trauma, isolation, being impulsive or aggressive, having a loss, whether that's relational, social loss, a work, professional loss, or a financial loss. So this is something that we're concerned about during COVID-19, where all of these things have been lost throughout large parts of society and throughout the world. What we know during a pandemic is that we come together. We feel like we're serving a purpose by quarantining and by connecting. But as this continues to drag on, as we're really starting to feel the loss, there is concern that we can see an uptick in suicides. Access to lethal means, having access to a large stockpile of pills or to firearms or anything where there's not a lot of opportunities to change your mind or for someone to find you and to intervene. Physical illness is another risk factor, as well as barriers to care. And in looking at this list, the one that stands out as the most important is trauma. For somebody who has experienced trauma, they're at a much higher risk for suicide. On the opposite end, protective factors can counteract those risk factors. Having effective clinical care for both mental and physical health, as well as any type of substance use disorder, that can be a huge protective factor. Any kind of clinical interventions, having family and community support, anything that makes us feel connected to others. Mental health care relationships, skills in problem solving, conflict resolution, and just nonviolent ways of handling disputes can be a huge protective factor. And then cultural and religious beliefs that discourage suicide. Not anything that stigmatizes suicide or mental health, but religious and cultural beliefs where people are encouraged to go for help and build hope. So finding the words, we need to start a conversation. If any of those red flags went off, we need to be the one who is empowered to start the conversation. We need to assume that we are the only one who has noticed this, and we might be the only one who's willing to reach out. We want to listen, express concern, and really reassure them. We want them to know that help is available, and there are a couple things we definitely want to stay away from and not say. So to start this conversation, you really need to be prepared. You want to have a list of resources, and you can find a list of resources at the TahoeLifeline.org website that are local. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention also has a very robust website and can help you connect to resources. You can also reach out to the hotline and ask them to help you identify some resources. But if we think about knowing what those resources are before we have to have this conversation, it's going to be much easier for us to start. We want to practice what we would say. And in a Zoom webinar type platform, we're not able to have the conversations necessary. And so I encourage you to follow up this training with another face-to-face when time allows, when COVID subsides. But for today, you might want to practice looking in the mirror and asking the question directly. The kids in the Mayo Clinic video said it very well. Don't be afraid to talk about it. Ask the question directly. Are you thinking about suicide? And if you are able to practice that either with someone else or in the mirror, it's going to help you build that muscle memory. It will not plant a seed. Plan the conversation for a time when you won't be in a hurry and you can spend time with that person. So right now, I'm not the best model. I'm hurrying through this presentation because we're trying to pack a lot of information into 30 minutes. But you want to have a time when you can be relaxed and spend time in silence. There's a lot of silence when someone is struggling with emotional issues. Mention the signs that prompted you to start the conversation. You know, I've noticed that you haven't been coming to Sunday services and that you've been late getting to work. I also know that it's the anniversary of your father's death and that he died by suicide. And when someone is struggling with grief and loss and they start to pull back, they might be experiencing thoughts of suicide. Are you thinking about suicide? And make it very clear that it's not coming out of the blue, that there's something that's going on that prompted this conversation. And then we ask directly. By asking directly, it lets the person know that you're willing to talk about suicide. It establishes that you're the person who, it establishes that you and the person who's at risk of suicide are talking about the same thing. If I were to say, you know, are you thinking about harming yourself? Are you thinking about hurting yourself? You might not be talking about suicide. You might think that you are, but for them, they might be thinking that suicide would end their pain and it's not going to hurt. So we want to make sure that we're being direct. Being direct does not put that idea into someone's head. Ask directly, are you thinking about suicide? Because if the answer is yes, we need to do a little bit more investigation. If you're concerned that they might act soon, don't leave them alone until help has arrived. Call 911 immediately if the attempt is underway or if there's anything that's medically necessary to treat. There's also a 24-hour crisis line for the county. Sierra Community House has a crisis line, a helpline, 1-800-736-1060. If we know that they are suicidal, let's call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. Or if there is a suicide attempt that's underway, if they've taken pills or they've got a deep cut again, if they've needed the emergency care, let's take them to the Tahoe Forest Emergency Room. The crisis line, the helpline would be an amazing resource if we've got someone who is suicidal and they really need to be connected to local resources and care. If we have someone who's actively suicidal and they've got a plan underway, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is going to be a better bet to help us get the tools necessary. Because as we're listening to someone, we want to be listening to both their reasons for living and their reasons for dying. And someone who's at the lifeline is going to be better trained to focus in on that. Once we hear what the person's reasons are for living, we can really help focus attention on that and get them into some safety planning. We want to validate that both options are something that they have access to. We don't have the ability to control that, but we do have the ability to highlight their reasons for living. What are your reasons for being here? What anchors you to life? And if they don't have many, we can help them come up with some. We want them to know that you care, that you're genuinely concerned about the situation and you're taking it seriously. We really want to focus on safety, finding out if they have access to lethal means, if they've started planning how they might end their life, removing them from the vicinity, and that might include calling law enforcement. If they are aggressive, if we feel in danger, we never put ourselves in the line of harm. And so you are always able to call for support. Call 911 if at any time you are concerned about your own safety. And at no point do we want to ask in a way where we want a no answer. If we think about Dr. Joyner's theory on interpersonal suicidality, they already feel like a burden. They already feel isolated. And so if we're asking them a question where we might make them seem like an additional burden, they're not going to answer honestly. So a question like, "You're not thinking of killing yourself, are you?" is going to put them on the defense. We want to ask in a way where we are open. We already talked about, are you thinking of harming yourself is very ambiguous. We might not be talking about the same thing. We don't want to promise secrecy. We can promise discretion and thoughtfulness. We want to involve that person in the decision-making process. Small things go a long way. I taught kindergarten for a number of years, and in kindergarten I would say, "We're going to write our names. Would you like to use the red crayon or the blue marker?" It was never, should we write our names or should we not write our names? This is what we're going to get done. And so if you're dealing with someone who is suicidal, you'll say, "We need to call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Would you like to use your cell phone or should we use mine and put it on speakerphone?" That gives them a small amount of a decision-making step. We want to say things like, "I care too much to keep a secret like this. You need help and I'm here to help you get help." When a person's life is at risk, safety is really the most important thing. I was on a conference call last week and I heard another presenter say, in regards to a young person, young people are really concerned that their friend is going to be mad at them. And their quote was, "It's better to have a friend that's mad at you than a dead friend." And that feels very harsh, but it's real. That is a reality that many young people face when they keep secrets. We also don't want to tell the person to do it. You might become very frustrated and angry, and you might just blow up and say, "You know what, just do it already." And it's a very dangerous thing to say. If we get to that point, we just need to walk away. We need to get somebody else to help intervene. I've heard this come up in situations where somebody is intoxicated and there's just a lot of conflict taking place. Reaching out. There's a great little video that we had created with some of the helpline information. So if you've got some place to promote videos for folks as far as what resources are available, you can find that at our YouTube channel. Getting help, having a list of resources, downloading the My3 app. The My3 app has some safety planning tools on it, and it helps a person stay safe. So if you have somebody that you're working with who has very let's say low-grade suicidality. They don't have an active plan, but they are struggling with thoughts of suicide. You can help them draft their safety plan and come up with their safety contacts. If it's a little bit higher level, you might have a counselor who's helping with safety planning. The hospital helps with safety planning. Again, we've got more phone numbers to connect to care. And there are local interventions in place through public and behavioral health. We also have additional resources. There are suicide prevention or post-prevention resources specific to COVID-19 available at the TahoeLifeline.org. We looked at suicidispreventable.org for some great materials for this Know the Signs campaign, which is run by Each Mind Matters, and you can download materials at Each Mind Matters as well. Veterans is a high-risk population, and maketheconnection.net is a great resource for veteran populations. And June is Pride Month, and so looking at LGBTQ youth and populations, there's a great resource at the Trevor Project. Take an additional training. We will have some of these trainings become available in the area as soon as COVID subsides and we can start coming together. Assist is a 2-day training. Safe Talk is a half-day training. Mental health first aid and youth mental health first aid are 8-hour trainings, and QPR is about an hour and a half. Upstream prevention, we don't have time for this video, but by taking a training like Know the Signs, we are working as bystanders, and we are going way far up in upstream so that we can ask the question long before a person gets into a suicidal crisis. My call to action to you right now is you're here. So if you are struggling, you're halfway to help. The next step is to reach out. You can reach out to the Lifeline. You can reach out to the helpline. You can reach out to me, to a trusted friend, family member. Reach out and disclose the pain that you're in. And if through this training you were thinking, man, this sounds a lot like my neighbor Bob or my cousin Sam or my coworker, I really need to have a conversation with them. Let's plan that conversation. You are halfway to helping others. You can prepare the resources that you might need should this need arise down the road. I'm going to share a survey. I would love your feedback. We want to spread the word. You can invite others to attend these trainings. We'll get the July and August trainings on the books shortly. You can also host a training. I am going to be moving this training up to at least 45 minutes. There's no way I can cram this into 30 minutes. So I thank you for bearing with me. I know that we've run over our time, but you can schedule a training for your organization. And again, I encourage you to take an additional training, especially a face-to-face training. This is what the feedback form is going to look like, and it will pop up when you close out of this webinar. So I have some time to remain on the line for questions. If you needed to hop off, I completely understand, and I appreciate you staying on longer. So thank you guys for your time. And I've got the Q&A section open if you do have any questions. All right. I don't see any questions coming through, but just know that I'm an email away. So if you do have questions that come up, you are welcome to reach out, and I am happy to connect. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for taking time to listen in today and to take this on as some professional development for yourself. I hope to see you at another training sometime down the road.